Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? I hope you're doing well and that you're having a pretty good morning time. So, today we are going to read three English texts. Three English texts. Ensemble, aujourd'hui, nous lirons trois textes d'anglais. Sans plus tarder, commençons. Last night, George was at a restaurant with Clara, Charlie, and Catherine. After dinner, George announced his engagement to Clara. George stood next to Clara. He raised his glass. He announced the engagement to his friends. He looked very happy. Clara was also at the restaurant. She sat at a table next to George. She smiled when he announced the engagement. She showed her friends her ring. It was very beautiful. Clara also looked very happy. Charlie and Catherine also sat at a table. They were excited for their friends. Charlie congratulated George and Clara. He shook George's hand. Catherine looked at Clara's ring. Catherine was happy for George and Clara. Nous poursuivons avec le second texte. Yesterday, I woke up at 6 a.m. because I had a very important document to send to my boss. The document was about my work contract. It was a busy morning for me. I didn't have enough time to have breakfast, but I took a shower, brushed my teeth, and then I started to work. I finally sent the email to my boss, and then I closed my computer and went to the living room to watch the news. When I finished watching the news at 11 a.m., I went to the kitchen to see if there was some food in the freezer. When I opened the freezer, there was nothing. I realized that my parents forgot to do the shopping. They didn't go to the market. I called my father to tell him that I was very hungry. He told me that he was not available free for the moment. I was so sad that I started to cry. I didn't want to have breakfast. I wanted to eat some good food. Bad day. Dernier texte. Answered, saw, asked, said, died, began, was, knew, loved, stopped, had, put on, walked, waited, took, bought, arrived, got on, sat down, got off. Mrs. Wilson and Mrs. Smith are sisters. Mrs. Wilson lives in a small house and Mrs. Smith lives in an apartment in London. One day, Mrs. Wilson visited her sister. When her sister answered the door, Mrs. Wilson saw tears in her eyes. What's the matter? She asked. Mrs. Smith said, my cat Sammy died last night, and I have no place to bury him. She began to cry again. Mrs. Wilson was very sad because she knew her sister loved the cat very much. Suddenly, Mrs. Wilson said, I can bury your cat in my garden and you can come and visit him sometimes. Mrs. Smith stopped crying and the two sisters had tea together. It was now 5 o'clock, and Mrs. Weston said it was time for her to go home. She put on her hat, coat, and gloves, and Mrs. Smith put the dead cat into a shopping bag. Mrs. Wilson took the shopping bag and walked to the bus stop. She waited a long time for the bus, so she bought a newspaper. When the bus arrived, she got on the bus, sat down, and put the shopping bag on the floor beside her feet. She then began to read the newspaper. When the bus arrived at her bus stop, she got off the bus and walked for about 2 minutes.